The kids I babysit have a code word for danger, and my blood ran absolutely cold the afternoon they actually had to use it. I had been babysitting the Miller kids for about 4 months when I first found out about their secret word. It was a completely average Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen island, helping 7-year-old Sophie with her spelling homework, while her older brother, 10-year-old Leo, was sprawled out on the living room rug playing video games. Their mother, Evelyn, had recently started a demanding new job as an ER nurse at the local hospital. Because of her grueling shifts, she needed someone reliable to watch the kids 4 days a week from the time they got out of school until she finally pulled into the driveway around 7:30 p.m. The pay was incredible, honestly better than any other college job I could find, and the kids were incredibly sweet. It seemed like the easiest, most perfect gig in the world. But looking back, there were signs from the very beginning that this wasn't a normal babysitting job. That Tuesday, Sophie looked up from her workbook, her big brown eyes staring right at me, and asked, "Harper, do you know the special word yet?" I frowned, genuinely confused. I put down my pen and smiled at her. "I don't think I do, sweetie." "What special word?" Sophie immediately clamped her mouth shut and glanced nervously toward the living room. Leo paused his game instantly. He dropped the controller, stood up, and walked over to the kitchen. Even at 10 years old, Leo took his role as the big brother incredibly seriously. He always had this watchful, protective aura around his little sister. Leo leaned against the counter, his expression taking on a seriousness that belonged on the face of a grown adult, not a 5th grader. "Mom taught us a code word," he explained, lowering his voice as if someone might be listening. "It's for emergencies. If we ever feel like we're in danger, or if we need help but we can't say it out loud, we use the word." "Okay," I said, leaning in, my curiosity completely piqued. "What's the word?" "Eclipse," Leo said firmly. "If me or Sophie ever say the word eclipse in a sentence, it means something is really wrong, and you need to pay attention right away." I nodded slowly, processing this. "That's a very smart idea. But why do you guys need a code word? Is there someone specific you're worried about?" Leo's shoulders tensed. He looked down at the marble countertop. "It's for our grandpa," he whispered. "He isn't allowed to see us anymore. Mom says he's sick in his head, and if he ever shows up at the house, we have to use the word so you know to lock the doors and call the police." Sophie chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. "Grandpa used to be really nice. He used to take us for ice cream and build Legos with us. But then his brain got sick, and he got really mean. He hurt Mommy once. She said sometimes people's brains change, and they forget how to be good." My heart broke looking at them. I could tell Evelyn had worked incredibly hard to explain a terrifying, complex adult situation to her young children in a way that made sense without completely traumatizing them. "I understand," I told them gently, making sure to maintain eye contact so they knew I was taking them seriously. "I will never forget the word, eclipse. But just so I'm prepared, do you guys have a picture of him?" "I need to know what he looks like, just in case." Leo nodded. He jogged over to the emergency tablet Evelyn kept permanently mounted by the front door. He swiped through the photo gallery and pulled up a picture from about 3 years ago. It showed a tall, broad-shouldered man with thinning silver hair and a thick, neatly trimmed gray beard. He was smiling warmly at the camera, his strong arms wrapped lovingly around a much younger Leo and Sophie. He looked like the picture-perfect, ideal American grandfather. And somehow, the fact that he looked so incredibly normal made the whole thing 10 times more terrifying. That conversation haunted me for a few days, but as the weeks went by, it faded into the background. Evelyn had seemed highly stressed during my interview, but I had chalked it up to the standard exhaustion of being a single mom with a high-pressure medical career. She had mentioned briefly that the kid's father had passed away when Sophie was a baby, and that her own parents were unavailable to help with childcare. Now, I understood that unavailable was a polite cover for a much darker reality. Once I knew the truth, however, all the little quirks about Evelyn's household started to make perfect, chilling sense. She had a state-of-the-art security system. There were high-definition cameras covering every square inch of the exterior: the front porch, the driveway, the backyard, and the side gates. Evelyn checked the live feeds obsessively from her phone while she was at work. She also had a strict rule that the kids were absolutely never allowed to answer the front door, not even for the mailman or neighbors they recognized, unless she had specifically texted me to expect a visitor. Furthermore, Evelyn always texted me exactly when she was leaving the hospital, and she shared her live GPS location with me every single evening, so I knew exactly when she would be pulling into the driveway. One afternoon, I was out in the front yard watching the kids draw with sidewalk chalk. An older gentleman walking a golden retriever stopped across the street and gave us a friendly wave. When I casually mentioned it to Evelyn later that evening, all the color drained from her face. She practically interrogated me, making me describe the man's height, weight, facial hair, and clothing in microscopic detail before finally letting out a massive sigh of relief when she realized it was just Mr. Henderson from 3 houses down. She was living in a constant state of hypervigilance. And soon, I would find out exactly why. The day everything went completely to hell started out like any other rainy Thursday. The skies in Seattle had been dumping heavy rain since the morning. I arrived at the house at 3:15 p.m., letting myself in with the specialized key code Evelyn had assigned to me. The kids got dropped off by the school bus about 20 minutes later. They bolted through the front door, soaking wet, laughing as they kicked off their muddy rain boots in the foyer and tossed their backpacks onto the bench. They immediately started their daily, entirely predictable argument about what to watch on TV while having their afternoon snack. I was in the middle of pouring them both glasses of apple juice, playing the role of peacekeeper, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ding-dong. It was followed instantly by 3 heavy, aggressive knocks that rattled the heavy wooden door. The kids froze. The argument over the TV remote died instantly. The house plunged into a suffocating, dead silence. Leo and Sophie locked eyes, and I saw pure, unadulterated terror wash over their young faces. "Don't move," I whispered to them. I crept quietly into the hallway and approached the wall-mounted security tablet. I tapped the screen to bring up the front porch camera feed. Standing there, getting soaked by the rain, was an older man. He was holding a large, soggy cardboard box tied with a red ribbon. He had silver hair plastered to his forehead and a gray beard that was a bit longer and wilder than in the photograph Leo had shown me, but the facial structure, the broad shoulders, the piercing eyes, it was undeniably him. It was their grandfather. My stomach plummeted straight into my shoes. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. I spun around to look at the kids. Leo had already grabbed Sophie's trembling hand and was backing slowly away from the front hallway, pulling her toward the stairs. I walked over to them quickly, keeping my footsteps light. But before I could even formulate a plan, the man outside began pounding on the door again. This time, he used a closed fist. Bang, bang, bang. "I know you're in there," a deep, booming voice echoed through the thick wood of the door. "I saw the school bus drop you off. Come give Grandpa a hug. I brought presents." Sophie let out a muffled whimper, burying her face into her brother's shoulder. Leo looked up at me, his face pale as a ghost, his jaw clenched tight. "Harper," Leo said, his voice remarkably steady despite the fear in his eyes. "I think the eclipse is going to happen tonight. We need to go watch it from upstairs." Hearing the code word spoken out loud sent a massive shockwave of adrenaline straight into my bloodstream. My training as a babysitter had not prepared me for a literal home invasion by a stalker relative. "Go," I mouthed to him, pointing up the stairs. "Go to your mom's room, lock the door, get into the master closet, and do not make a sound. I am right behind you." Leo didn't hesitate. He practically dragged Sophie up the carpeted stairs. As soon as they were out of sight, I pulled my cell phone from my back pocket with shaking hands. I immediately sent a rapid-fire text to Evelyn. "Your dad, ISATTHE front door, KISARE hiding, UPS stairs. Calling 911 now." Without waiting for a reply, I dialed 911 and pressed the phone tight against my ear. While it was ringing, the man outside shouted again. "Evelyn, open this damn door! You are being ridiculous! You can't keep my own flesh and blood away from me!" He thought Evelyn was home. He didn't realize it was just a 21-year-old college student standing between him and the kids. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's calm, professional voice came through the speaker. "Hi, yes, I'm a babysitter at 442 Elmbridge Lane," I whispered frantically, backing away from the front door and moving toward the kitchen where I had a clear view of the front hallway, but remained hidden. "The children's grandfather is trying to break into the house. There is an active restraining order against him. He has a history of violence. The kids and I are alone in the house." "Okay, honey, I'm dispatching officers to your location right now," the operator said, her tone instantly sharpening. "They are running lights and sirens. Are all the doors and windows locked?" "Yes," I breathed out. "I just checked them when I got here." "I know it's hard, but I need you to stay on the line with me," she instructed. "Do not engage with him. Do not let him know you are in there if you can avoid it." Suddenly, the pounding at the front door stopped. I held my breath, listening intently. The silence that followed was somehow infinitely worse than the shouting. I crept back over to the tablet to check the camera feeds. The front porch was empty. "He's not at the front door anymore," I whispered to the dispatcher, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I quickly swiped through the other camera feeds. Driveway, empty. Side gate, empty. Then I clicked on the backyard patio camera. There he was. He had somehow hopped the 6-foot wooden privacy fence. He was standing on the back patio, staring directly into the lens of the security camera. The friendly, grandfatherly facade had completely melted away. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. He dropped the soggy present box onto the wet concrete. He reached into his thick canvas raincoat and pulled out a heavy, black iron tire iron. Oh my God, I choked out into the phone. He has a weapon. He's at the back sliding glass door. He has a tire iron. Officers are exactly 3 minutes away, the dispatcher urged. Get upstairs right now. Lock yourself in a room with the children and barricade the door. Do not hang up. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Just as I reached the landing, I heard the most terrifying sound I have ever experienced in my life. Crash. The sound of shattering safety glass echoed violently through the entire house. He had smashed through the sliding door in the kitchen. Heavy, wet boots crunched over the broken glass. He was inside. Evelian! His voice roared from the bottom floor, echoing up the stairwell. It didn't sound human. It sounded feral. You can't hide them from me! They are my grandchildren! I bolted into Evelyn's master bedroom and slammed the heavy oak door shut behind me, twisting the deadbolt lock. I quickly scanned the room for anything I could use as a weapon. Evelyn didn't keep guns in the house, but leaning in the corner of her room was a solid steel, heavy-duty baseball bat that she kept for self-defense. I grabbed it, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the taped handle. I moved into the massive walk-in closet where Leo and Sophie were huddled together on the floor, tucked behind a row of winter coats. Sophie had her hands clamped over her ears, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Leo had his arms wrapped tight around her, his eyes wide and terrified. I knelt down in front of them, keeping the phone on speaker and setting it on a shelf. "The police are almost here," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "You are going to be okay. I promise you." "He's on the stairs." The dispatcher's voice came through faintly. "Can you hear him?" I strained my ears. Yes. I could hear the slow, heavy thud of his boots hitting the wooden steps, one by one. He wasn't rushing. He was taking his time, confident that there was nowhere for us to go. Thud, thud, thud. "Where are my little angels?" He called out, his voice suddenly shifting into a chilling, sing-song tone that made the hairs on my arms stand straight up. "Grandpa brought you something special! Come out, wherever you are!" He reached the second floor landing. I stood up, positioning myself directly between the closet door and the main bedroom door. I raised the heavy steel bat over my right shoulder, planting my feet shoulder-width apart, just like my dad had taught me in high school softball. My heart was beating so fast and hard, I thought my chest was going to crack open. I heard him pacing the hallway. He opened the door to Sophie's room. Crash. I heard a lamp shatter. He was tearing the place apart. Then he opened Leo's door. More crashing. A bookshelf being knocked over. Finally, his heavy footsteps stopped right outside the master bedroom door. I saw the brass doorknob slowly begin to turn. It hit the locked mechanism and stopped. "Evelyn!" he growled through the wood. "Open the damn door." I didn't make a sound. I barely even breathed. "I said open it!" he screamed. Suddenly, he swung the heavy tire iron against the doorknob. Bang. The wood splintered. Bang. The locking mechanism groaned. On the third massive strike, the door frame completely shattered, and the door swung violently open, hitting the wall. He stepped into the room. He looked around wildly, his chest heaving, his eyes bloodshot and completely devoid of reason. He didn't look like a grandfather anymore. He looked like a monster. His eyes locked onto me, standing in the doorway of the closet, gripping the bat. He stopped, looking thoroughly confused for a fraction of a second. "Who the hell are you?" he barked, gripping the tire iron tightly. "Where is my daughter?" "She's not here," I said, trying to make my voice project loudly and confidently, even though my knees were literally shaking. "I'm the babysitter. The police are pulling up right now. You need to drop that weapon and leave immediately." As if on cue, the wail of police sirens suddenly became audible, screaming down the suburban street and rapidly approaching the house. His face shifted from rage to sheer panic. But instead of running, his eyes darted to the closet behind me. He heard a tiny, muffled whimper escape from Sophie's lips. "Get out of my way," he snarled, raising the tire iron and lunging directly at me. Adrenaline took completely over. I didn't think, I just reacted. I swung the steel bat with every single ounce of strength I had in my body, aiming not for his head, but for his center mass. The heavy barrel of the bat connected with a sickening crack against his ribs on his right side. He let out a guttural scream of pain, dropping the tire iron on the plush carpet as he stumbled backward, clutching his side. "Get away from them!" I screamed, stepping forward and raising the bat to swing again. But before I could, the downstairs front door was kicked wide open with tremendous force. "Seedle Police! Drop your weapons! Show your hands!" Multiple heavy footsteps thundered into the house. The grandfather's eyes went wide. He looked at me, looked at the tire iron on the floor, and then turned and bolted back out into the hallway. H.E.'s UPS stairs! I screamed at the top of my lungs. H.E.'s N-T-H-E, Howway! I heard officers rushing up the stairs. Stop right there! Put your hands on your head! Do-IT now! There was a brief, violent scuffle in the hallway. I heard a heavy body hit the floor, followed by the metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting shut. Suspect is in custody. A deep voice yelled out, "Clear the rest of the floor!" 2 officers suddenly appeared in the doorway of the master bedroom, their service weapons drawn. Seeing me standing there trembling with a bat, one officer quickly lowered his gun. "Are you the caller? Are the children safe?" I dropped the bat. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. My legs finally gave out, and I sank to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "They're in the closet," I choked out. The officers moved in immediately. A female officer holstered her weapon and gently coaxed Leo and Sophie out of the closet. They ran straight past her and buried themselves into my arms. We sat there on the floor of the closet, a tangled mess of tears and shaking limbs, while the police secured the chaotic scene. About 20 minutes later, the screech of tires echoed from the driveway. Evelyn had practically abandoned her car on the lawn. She burst through the front door, still wearing her light blue hospital scrubs, screaming for her children. When she ran into the bedroom and saw us sitting on the floor surrounded by police, she collapsed. She crawled over to us, wrapping her arms around Leo, Sophie, and me in one massive, desperate hug. She was wailing, kissing the tops of their heads, rocking them back and forth. She looked at me, her face pale and streaked with mascara, and mouthed the words, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The aftermath of that day was a sprawling, exhausting nightmare of legal procedures and psychological trauma. Paramedics checked the kids and me on the scene. Physically, we were completely unharmed, but the psychological damage was deep and immediate. The police took the grandfather away in the back of a squad car, and a detective named Sarah Higgins stayed behind to take our official statements. I sat at the kitchen table, picking glass shards out of my socks, as Detective Higgins gently walked me through the entire timeline. Evelyn sat beside me, gripping my hand so hard her knuckles were white. It was during that interview that I finally learned the full, devastating truth. 2.5 years ago, Evelyn's father, Arthur, had been diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, a cruel, aggressive form of the disease that aggressively attacks the areas of the brain responsible for impulse control, personality, and empathy. Before the disease, Arthur had been a beloved high school history teacher, a gentle giant. But as the brain tissue died, the man he was died with it. He became violently paranoid. He became convinced that Evelyn was abusing the children and keeping them away from him out of spite. The delusions became his reality. 8 months prior to the break-in, he had shown up at the house in a manic state and shoved Evelyn down the front stairs, fracturing her collarbone. That was the day she got the ironclad restraining order. She had desperately tried to get him institutionalized, but the legal and medical systems were slow and complicated, and as long as he had moments of lucidity, the state refused to force him into a locked psychiatric facility, until now. Because he had violated a permanent restraining order, broken into a home with a deadly weapon, and attempted to assault a bystander, the gloves came completely off. He was held without bail. The next few months were grueling. I had to take a leave of absence from a few of my college courses because I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing in the bedroom doorway with that heavy tire iron. I started going to therapy twice a week to deal with the extreme PTSD. But despite the trauma, I refused to quit my job. Evelyn gave me a massive bonus and told me she would completely understand if I never wanted to set foot in her house again. But when I thought about Leo bravely using the code word and Sophie trusting me to protect her, I knew I couldn't walk away. They needed stability, and I wasn't going to let that disease take away any more of their peace. Evelyn upgraded the security system to military-grade levels. We had reinforced steel doors, installed and shatterproof laminates put on all the ground floor windows. I kept working for them, and slowly, agonizingly, the kids started to heal. Leo stopped flinching every time the doorbell rang. Sophie stopped having night terrors. 6 months later, the trial finally took place. Walking into that grand, marble-floored courthouse in downtown Seattle was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I sat on the hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, my hands sweating, waiting to be called to the witness stand. When I finally walked into the room, I saw Arthur sitting at the defense table. He looked nothing like the monster who had broken into the house. He was wearing an oversized Orange County jumpsuit. He looked frail, confused, and terribly old. The rapid progression of his dementia had stripped away his aggression, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man who barely seemed to understand where he was. Taking the oath and testifying against him was agonizing. The defense attorney tried to paint the picture of a harmless, confused old man who just wanted to give his grandchildren presents. But the prosecutor, a sharp-as-a-tack woman in a tailored Navy suit, played the security footage. The jury watched him leap the fence. They watched him pull the tire iron. They heard my frantic 911 call echoing through the silent courtroom. There was no denying the immense, lethal danger he had posed. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: armed burglary, aggravated assault, and felony violation of a protective order. At the sentencing hearing a few weeks later, the judge delivered a harsh but necessary reality check. He acknowledged the tragedy of Arthur's medical condition, but firmly stated that public safety, and specifically the safety of young children, had to absolutely come first. Arthur was sentenced to 8 years in a maximum security state prison that featured a specialized, locked psychiatric ward for inmates with severe neurological decline. He would likely never see the outside of a locked facility for the rest of his natural life. When the gavel finally banged down, Evelyn let out a sob that was equal parts sheer relief and profound, bottomless grief. She had finally secured the absolute safety of her children, but the price was mourning her father all over again. Life eventually moved on. It always does. I stayed with the Miller family for 2 more full years until I finally graduated college and got accepted into a master's program across the country in New York. Saying goodbye to them was easily one of the most emotional days of my entire life. We had an intimate farewell dinner at their house. The reinforced doors and heavy alarms had simply become background noise to a home that was finally filled with laughter again. Leo was 12 now, sprouting up like a weed, and Sophie was 9, deeply involved in ballet and completely thriving. As I was packing the trunk of my car to leave for the airport, Evelyn came out to the driveway. She had tears in her eyes as she handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. "I don't even know how to begin to thank you," Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking. "You didn't just watch my kids. You saved their lives. You saved my entire world." I hugged her tight, crying right there in the driveway. "They saved me too, Evelyn. They are the bravest kids I've ever met." When I finally got to my terminal at the airport, I sat down at the gate and carefully untied the ribbon on the little box. Inside was a beautiful, custom-framed photograph. It was a picture of me, Leo, and Sophie taken at a summer carnival we had gone to a few months prior. We were covered in powdered sugar from funnel cakes, laughing hysterically at the camera. Tucked behind the glass was a small, handwritten note on thick stationery. It was written in Leo's careful, looping handwriting, with a little heart drawn at the bottom by Sophie. The note simply read, "We love you, Harper. Thank you for being our eclipse." I sat in the crowded airport terminal and cried, holding the frame against my chest. I had learned far too early that the world could be a dark, terrifying, and unpredictable place. I learned that sometimes the monsters aren't strangers hiding in the bushes. Sometimes they are the people who are supposed to love you the most. But I also learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being absolutely terrified, shaking in your boots, and still standing your ground to protect the innocent. I would carry the memory of that day and the strength of those 2 incredibly brave kids with me for the rest of my life.